Hello, everybody. Let me share my screen. Can everybody see some slides
Yes.
that folks are seeing? Perfect. Okay. Well, yeah, welcome everybody. This is our first, it's a kickoff for the CSOC working group. So welcome everybody. Before we say anything else, I wanted to define a few things so you know what we're doing here. What is this? Are you in the right place? What are our goals? Let me see if I can. Are you still seeing my slides?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So before we get into introductions and some logistics, I wanted to put a few definitions out there just so everybody's um, sort of on the same page about that. Um, so what is a CSOC? We're going to use that term a lot. This is a Commons Services Operations Center. It's used by organizations that run more than one Gen3 system. A CSOC allows a team of engineering and security staff to set up and configure, secure, operate, and monitor two or more data commons or data meshes. So what is the mission of this working group? And I guess I should say that this could be changed or modified, as the working group decides later on, but this is sort of what we were thinking as the kickoff. So the working group will focus on topics and improvements to benefit those organizations managing multiple Gen3 systems. Part of the working group focus will be on the development of dashboards and tools that will enable an administrator to configure, launch, and monitor a data commons or mesh. We will also discuss and work on other improvements and topics of interest to multi-Gen 3 organizations. I think basically we see all of you and the organizations that you're running as allies and collaborators, and we want to make sure you're a success and make sure that it's straightforward and secure to operate multiple Gen 3 systems at once. Okay, so that was the mission. Um, we'll talk a little bit about logistics, but most of today, I think, is going to be on introductions. So I'd like to go around and really hear from everybody, introduce yourself and your team, your Gen 3 setup and plans for the future. Um, One of the purposes of this, in addition to advancing some Gen 3 code improvements, is to learn from each other. So it's really important that everybody knows each other and we can learn a bit about how everybody's operating. Um, if we have time, we'll go into some of the use cases as we saw them, and this is prior to hearing everybody's input. So we'll might modify these, and then Jawad will talk a bit about um, kind of what he's been working on in terms of a dashboard and hearing and sharing what we are thinking about in terms of requirements and roadmaps. So you can get a sort of preview of that. Um, like I said, the introductions are kind of the focus today, but we'll see how far we get in the rest. And before we kick off that, I'll just mention just one more slide about logistics. So we're going to have monthly meetings, or we see them as monthly. I neglected to tell you when I sent out the doodle poll that these were going to be monthly. So I'll send out another doodle poll just to make sure that people that this was like a good standing time. I'm not sure if it was. We do have a dedicated Slack channel. Um, I think everybody on this invite should have already received an invitation to join this. It's different than the Gen 3 community channel. It's in a different workspace, so it might be a little confusing to find. But we hope to have working group communications there. You can feel free to share information about your setup or questions, sort of in addition to the Gen 3 working group. And then finally, we'll have minutes, recordings, and agendas will all be on GitHub. So before we dive into introductions, are there any questions that anybody has? Feel free to take yourself off mute if you like.
I don't have questions, but I have a prompt in while you're giving the introductions is if you can also describe some of the pain points you have, that'll be helpful for us to come up with, roadmap features that would be nice to build into this uh, CSOC application essentially. And
Yeah.
Great. Okay, sorry, I did have some more prompts. Let me just bring that back up quickly. All right, so thanks, Jawad. Yeah, additional prompts. Introduce yourself, your team, your Gen3 setup and plans, any pain points you have in terms of setup and maintenance. Try to keep this to a few minutes. I think I said 4, but just try to, I guess, be relatively brief. So with that, in sort of alphabetical order as it shows up on my list of participants, I'm gonna call on Alan Walsh to share a bit about yourself and your group and your Gen3 use.
Great. I'm used to being called last with Walsh as a last name, so this is great. Hello, everyone. Alan Walsh, Indiana University, and I work in a team called Research and Data Services, which is part of something called Research Technologies, which is in the central IT org. We're the group, like many other schools, dedicated to supporting faculty researchers. All the HPC people are my colleagues in high performance storage and the like. Our team is dedicated to supporting data needs, kind of life cycle data needs for researchers. I'm going to ask my colleague Amy to introduce herself real quickly, and then I'll say a few more things about our experience with Gen3.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Alan. My name's Amy Burns. I'm newer to working on our Gen3 project. I'm, I guess, technically kind of more of a functional role as a product owner, working with our stakeholders as well as with our technical side. I've certainly enjoyed getting to learn about it and reading through the Slack to learn more about the functionality as we're exploring multiple deployments.
So our story begins just a couple of years ago. We got called in like a consult because one of the things our team has expertise in is cloud computing. And this group reached out to us, said, hey, we're trying to get this application set up in AWS and we can't make it work. Can you help us? And here we are 2 years later. And we went to that first meeting and the person asking for help said, oh, by the way, I'm leaving in a month. So we ended up kind of jumping in and helping them. This was at the end of a research grant. The group we've been working with primarily does grant-funded research in NIAAA, which is the alcoholism abuse center within the NIH. And as I said, they were at the end of their grant trying to get this commons brought up, and we were able to help them eventually get that going. And then we went through it, the usual no-cost extension year, and I'm happy to say they did get funded again for another 5 years. So that's our starting point with Gen3 is this thing that they call RDAC, which is the AlCepNet Research Data Commons. So that already actually has 2 because they wanted to have like a production Gen3, and then they wanted to have a what they call a demo where they showcase like new data dictionary stuff and some of the customizations that they're interested in doing. So there's already, even just with that one project, there's a couple. And that same group is actually housed in the biostatistics department within our School of Medicine. So they're kind of at the center of everything and involved in many, many projects. And already another area of interest that they've noted, they have this thing called the Indiana Precision Oncology project, which is cancer research, obviously. And they're interested in another Gen3 deployment for that. And then I work with a different group. We work with a lot of groups, obviously, but one that we're actively involved in right now is funded through NIDA, which is the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And that is a P30 grant, which is like a regional research center on cannabis, cannabinoids, and abuse. And so it's some interesting research there. We've got different centers, one doing lipidomics and one doing research on some advanced microscopy, but all of it centered around neuroscience and addiction. So those are the main ones that we're looking at now. And I don't see anyone here from Florida, but I know we've also been helping quite a bit with a group from the University of Florida that's doing cancer research and is hoping to bring up a Gen 3 based data commons. I know I'm just over my time, but I just wanted to say something to Jawad's prompt. We started just by looking at the documentation on GitHub, trying to figure out how to set something up. Kind of missed the whole CSOC thing, even though it was there. We didn't see it, so we kind of started setting things up as freestanding. Wish we knew then what we know now, kind of a thing. But very excited, and I would just say, Jawad, for me mentally, it kind of all came together. I want to say back in the spring, you gave a presentation to an internet to cloud group. I think Phil Fenstermacher from William and Mary met you at KubeCon and invited you. And I would say that presentation, that hour that you gave, just like everything sort of clicked. The history, like where Gen 3 came from, that was just perfect. So ever since been very excited about joining this group. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Alan, for all that information and background. So just continuing going down the list by first name alphabetical. Brian. Brian Turner, you're next.
Yeah, sure. And I may actually hand it over to Luca, who certainly knows much more about this than I do, but I'll give a brief introduction. So we're, well, as you can see from our background, also at the University of Chicago in a group called Data for the Common Good. And our first instance of, well, and I guess technically at this point, our only instance of Gen 3 is for our pediatric cancer data commons. Although to the earlier point about multiple instances for different tiers, we absolutely do have a sort of development, a staging tier and a demo tier in addition to our production tier. But outside of the pediatric cancer data commons, we have started working with a number of other groups who are interested in setting up commons in other rare diseases, and so many of those won't align with the data structures that we've set up, the data dictionary that we've set up for our pediatric cancer data commons, and so we're at the point of quite soon, I'm sure, starting to plan for deployment of additional Gen 3 instances for different groups. And so certainly that poses questions for us around, best practices for supporting multiple instances and, do you share certain services across multiple instances and many other questions that that come about when you move from sort of a single commons ecosystem into potentially supporting multiples. But maybe for the sake of convenience, I'll hand it over to Luca to continue talking, or did you want to loop back around, Michael, to him via?
No, Luca right now sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Cool. Hello, I'm Luca. Yeah, the only thing to add to what Brian said is that aside for all these different tiers of the pediatric cancer data common and future data commons coming, we also use the same cloud automation architecture for a different project that has not much to do to data common, but we will use the same framework as like fence arbors and so on to handle all like the common functionality things. So will still be nice to be able to have like everything in one place. In our production tier of the data common is actually run by the CTDS CSOC, so it's already within your CSOC.
Thanks, Luca and Brian. For those who just joined, we're just going down and doing introductions right now before we do any other content. So, Claire, I think you're next on the list.
Thanks. So, yep, Claire Wright, NESI New Zealand eScience Infrastructure. We have been running a Gen 3, I guess, in a production, well, for us, a production environment for about coming up 4 years now, and likewise have a test instance as well. we have at times, I guess depending on project funding and things, had a second Gen 3 running for a different project, which was much more kind of prototype and didn't have a lot of the same maturity in terms of kind of security or monitoring or anything like that. And so I guess we're interested in this group from a perspective of if that gets refunded, can we, I guess similar to Brian, have questions around best practice and what can be combined in terms of monitoring and things. We also have another group in New Zealand based at the University of Auckland who run a Gen 3 for a different project. So we tend to work together with them quite a lot, but we don't share any actual infrastructure or monitoring systems or anything like that. So again, I guess keen to learn and look at whether that's sort of plausible or whether actually keeping things separate is more sensible. But I think like a lot of things, we're keen to learn, but not always in a position to implement things. So the development cycles might be a little bit slower on our side. Yeah, that's me, I think.
Great. Thanks, Claire. And just, I think it's already clear, but just to make it, just say it out, we are looking for feedback and, interactions with groups at various levels of, Gen 3 deployment, whether you have single or multiple systems. I think we can all learn from each other, and we hope to incorporate all of your feedback and hopefully, move the enterprise forward. All right, my Zoom is spinning, so hopefully nothing bad happens right now on my ball. But I'll call on Colin next. Colin Griffin. Oh, you're on mute, Colin.
I can never get the mute right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I hope it's on the right microphone. Hey, I'm Colin Griffin. I have a company called Crumware. We're maybe a little different than a lot of the folks here. We are not a research institution or group ourselves. We're a software engineering and platform engineering development group that specializes in cloud native software infrastructure, applications, developer portals, Kubernetes, all those things. We got involved with Gen 3 through a project at Wake Forest University. Our ultimate goal with Gen 3 as things have evolved for us over the years is to help operationalize and enable researchers and the institutions to do more with their cloud environments and follow best practices and standards to secure and develop those cloud environments where an application like Gen 3 may be deployed and the rest of the life cycle and everything else that needs to go along with that. So a lot of the lessons learned and things that people are going through adopting Gen 3 in a Kubernetes environment and cloud native, those skills and expertise can be applied elsewhere to best practice and enable all kinds of other things as well. So happy to join in and learn from you all and contribute back as well.
Great. Thanks, Colin. Next on the list is Gordon or Uwe, whoever wants to speak for Australian Biocommons.
Yeah, I can introduce myself real quick, then I'll hand over to Uwe to share more about our Gen 3 journey. I'm Gordon from Australian Biocommons. I've been working with Gen 3 for over a year, managing several instances in AWS. And for deployments, we use AWS CDK pipelines along with the EKS blueprints. And we've recently made our deployment code public available. So if anyone want to have a look. And pass over to Uwe.
Hi, I'm Uwe. I'm an addict. I have 2 Gen 3s now, and there's probably more coming. There's one that's called the ACDC, or the Australian Cardiovascular Disease Commons. That one is operated for a collective of cardiovascular researchers. We'll have genomic data, multi-omic data, lipidomic data in it. And then we have another one that is just starting up, which is Omics3, and that's going to be a multi-omics platform. There's a whole thing in the front where they do data collection, sample collection, and all those kind of things. And then downstream, Gen3 is going to host and share the data that's being collected in that Omics3 environment, and probably also going to connect up to analysis platforms so that researchers can do analysis on the data that they are collecting. There's potentially a third one coming. I'm not sure yet how it's going to look like. And as Gordon already said, we're mostly running these on AWS. We have a pipeline set up to start them fairly straightforward and easily. They all connect to central log collection. It's all set up with Grafana in the loop. They're somewhat monitored, and because those projects are not fully live yet, we don't have the full operations in place, but we're in the process of getting the full operations in place in order to prepare us to run multiple commons.
Great, thanks, Uwe and Gordon. Next is Kyle.
Yeah, hello, Kyle Elrott from Oregon Health and Science University, Knight Cancer Research Institute. We run one Gen 3 instance for the Alliance for Cancer Early Detection, which is an international consortium. We're kind of evolving that into being more of a public-facing instance for Knight Cancer research. And then we're also running an internal one to track controlled access, precision oncology, and other projects with data that should be maintained within the hospital infrastructure. So the public-facing one runs on the AWS, and the internal one runs on OpenStack. And also we have to manage multiple S3 environments, including private MinIO or Ceph instances, as well as AWS buckets. And so being able to track multiple S3 endpoints all over the place, and also move data between our public and private instances is kind of the things we're thinking about right now.
Great, thanks, Kyle. And now Plamen, you are up next.
Hi guys, Plamen Martinov, currently at Open Commons Consortium. We run and manage data commons and operate data commons. Our biggest partner is University of Chicago. We have cross-functional teams to work collaboratively. We also work with Colin at Cromware as well. And we currently run 6 data commons with almost 2.5 petabytes of data across various sectors, such as liquid biopsy, as well as precision oncology data. And our newest project is related to the Prometheus White House Cancer Moonshot 2.0 initiative. History on my side is I started with the University of Chicago way back in the day. I feel so old right now, and I have white hair to show it, even at this age, when there was a team of only 2 people where Bob was starting to create this. I was the CISO at the University of Chicago and also worked as Director of Risk Management for the Center for Translational Data Sciences. And a couple of years ago, I decided to take a new challenge and kind of help build and work with everybody else on expanding the Gen 3 data platform in a way that it makes it scalable and usable across different environments. We've had opportunities to bring Gen 3 to GCP. We worked with partners on a proxy level for Azure, but we have a general goal on our side. Security is always going to be my first hat, and the technology piece ultimately needs to be the main focal point on this. So I'm excited about this group and how we can all collaborate.
Great, thanks, Plamen. And then last but not least, Ruslan, sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Ruslan. I'm from CFO and I'm new to Gen3, but you can know Peter Lucas, who is also work at CFO and collaborate with University of Chicago. So similarly to Colin introduction, I mean, we are software engineers who help to build software. We're located in Europe, in the Netherlands, and there is interest from institutions about installing Gen3. So I'm here to learn and yeah, share knowledge. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Those are great introductions. And I had we got through them in good time. I was not sure how fast we would get through that. I realize not everybody on the CETA side, you might not know, there's a couple people on the call as well. So I think you've seen me in many things. I'm Michael Fitzsimons, Director of Research Programs and manage the outreach activities. And we'll just Jawad, Sarah, and Clint in that order. Do you want to just quickly introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Jawad Qureshi. I'm the lead platform engineer here at U Chicago or CTDS. My job is basically to build out systems that we can run and others can run easily. And yeah, nice meeting you all.
Hey, Sarah, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself? Oh, you're on mute.
I was trying to also take notes. I'm the designated note taker today, but so my name is Sarah Volk de Garcia, and I am on the user services side in Gen3. And so I particularly focus a lot on documentation, but I've also been working on the HEAL project quite a bit and a few other like sub projects, right? So like the Nextflow project and Direct Pay.
Thanks, Sarah. Clint, you don't have to go on camera, but if you want to introduce yourself.
Sorry, my camera is broken, but I'm Clint Molson. I am the Director of Security / CISO here at CTDS.
Great, thanks, Clint. And Peter pointed out to me that he's on the line, and I missed him. It's because you're not in the same order as everybody else on Zoom for some reason. Your name is at the top. But anyway, go ahead, Peter. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Peter Vassilatos. I'm the Director of Engineering for Gen3. And I'm pretty excited about this working group, both because of, well, especially for collaborating on the needs and on the solutions. This is a really important part of building out Gen3.
Great. Okay, then we'll just jump back into, Jawad, do you want me to share my screen or do you want to share your screen or how do you want to do that? Right, you're on mute.
There we go. I think I can probably just share my screen. I just need to close out some of these windows that don't make sense. Don't need Jira right now.
Is this recorded?
It is, yes. Yeah, we'll put the recording and notes. We're going to try to be very official about this and have all these posted up for everybody to see and reference.
All right. So I had a couple of slides where at least try to share what my thoughts on what this CSOC should be and what we should incorporate into it. Some use cases that we've been managing to put together and how we're planning to approach this problem essentially. So basically, the first use case that we've come up with for this CSOC is that we can start build on top of like an already existing Kubernetes enterprise Kubernetes infrastructure. So we assume that people already have in place some structure, and then they are new to Gen3, but they have enterprise infrastructure in place. And for those users, how can we make it simpler to spin up one or more Gen3 instances, essentially? That's the first use case that we've come up with for this CSOC. The second use case that we were thinking about is that the CSOC also sets up the required enterprise infrastructure for people that that want to start with Gen3 but never really heard of Kubernetes or the cloud. So we can come in and use best practices to set up something in AWS, for example. Yeah. And the third use case is the ability to set up multiple data commons and or meshes and being able to do a whole end-to-end configuration and deployment of all of these data commons, either using people's own infrastructure or using infrastructure that is provisioned by this CSOC application. Yeah. So I have, yeah, we're working on some like a set of requirements. And the purpose of the CSOC would be to have like a centralized management platform that the operators and others can use to so basically host like a backend of Gen3, or as Bob likes to call it, the C panel or the control panel of Gen3. And it's not just for one instance, but you can also like do to multiple instances. And the idea is to empower organizations to be able to utilize all of Gen3's potential, but do it securely and with operational efficiency. And it should be relatively simple to do this task. And then also for us to build whatever we're building in a way that we can tie into different open source tools for monitoring, security, or insights or other things. Essentially, so it becomes like a platform to build on top of. And the third goal is essentially to do it in a collaborative way with the community, solving real, actual problems that you guys have run into, so that we're creating value from the get-go. Yeah. So we have sort of a proof of concept of something that could resemble this, and we've made some progress on it. So there is a core platform in under development right now with some of the features that are already functional. The main one being a fully featured Kubernetes dashboard. So any Kubernetes resource that gets created, the operators gets visibility into it without you having to use all these Kubernetes tools. So that'll be a get-go. And then we can also link back to the documentation of all these different resources, what they are to drive learning as well. Like, what am I actually looking at? What is this? So hopefully having that in a nice UI can be an eye-opener for certain people. And in this world of AI, you can always ask questions further when you're a little confused. It's an agent-based solution. So you have your centralized setup with the UI and a backend, and then you deploy an agent to your Kubernetes clusters wherever you're setting them up. They reach back out, and then you get full control over those clusters and can start deploying Gen3 and or other apps through this solution. Helm is the backbone of our deployment, so it has a Helm integration essentially. So you can discover applications that support Helm, and then you can configure and deploy them. And then for Gen3 specifically, what we're hoping to build out is sort of a deployment wizard. You go through a questionnaire of what modules do you want, how do you want your authentication, and et cetera, et cetera. And in the end, you get a actual Gen3 deployment. Yeah. We're also building in some authentication and authorization into this app as well. And you can integrate with, different authentication and authorization providers. For now, I've just been playing around with Keycloak because it's an interesting piece of technology that I would like to get more interface with. But we've just done a basic integration so far. But you do get a centralized management. You get a unified view of all of your Gen 3 deployments. And yeah. Some things that we're planning on adding over the course of the next few months and iterations of these meetings and hearing the feedback from all of you is monitoring and observability. For the longest time, we've been with Datadog, but Datadog is an expensive tool. So there was a push about a year ago for us to be able to leverage open source tools to be able to give the level of insight and observability into our Gen 3 deployments, but also since we are building on top of open source components, how can we make that those kinds of tools available for the rest of the community? Grafana has been really nice for us. We get all the logs and metrics into a centralized place, and all the data is stored in S3 buckets. Yeah. And then the second part is basically setting up some sort of cloud integration. So there is also the provisioning and management of all the infrastructure in the cloud. We haven't built out anything yet, and I do want to listen to all of you guys' feedback. Really interested in learning more and trying out more of what you guys at Australian Biocommons has built out based on EKS blueprints. But I also want this tool to be something that we use internally as well to manage all of our deployments as well, so that we can keep building out more and more features. And yeah. Another point is just the ability to share the cloud spending across all these multiple different AWS accounts and being able to do that. That's something that that we're planning on adding. I don't know if that's helpful or not. That would be a good way for us to basically get some feedback on. And some additional features that we're essentially going to work on is role-based access control. Let's say you are not the admin, but you want to do some other, like you want to just spin up a Gen 3, or you want to kick off jobs or something. We can figure out like what sort of roles or personas that makes sense to build out for. But yeah, implement some sort of RBAC into this CSOC application so we can build out this application for certain personas. So you have the super admins, and then basically maybe some operators that just need to do housekeeping tasks on already deployed Gen 3s, or we can figure out the levels of access that we need to build towards. The first version is going to be just everyone has super admin until we figure out this role-based access control piece. And obviously, once you are building something this powerful that can spin up infrastructure in the cloud, gets you access to the back end of Gen 3, there needs to be a lot of security and restrictions on how you can access this. Right now, I think we're going to go with a dumb way of just doing an IP restriction on who can access this dashboard access, but I'm all ears to hear about like what other things we can do to enhance the security and basically hide this control panel of all these Gen 3 instances, so that you need to be in a secure zone before you can access it, even if there are authentication controls in place.
Joanne, I have a quick question. Is what you just talked about part of the RBAC, or is that a separate thing?
I would say it's a separate thing. It's just the ability to access the CSOC at all. Like it's like to hide it from the internet, basically. So that so even before you get to the door, this is hiding the door. The other is once you're in with your ID, what can I do?
Thanks.
Juwan, I do have a question. This is great, by the way. Very thoughtful. As you're describing these features that you guys are already work in progress on, is all this as of right now kind of MVP 1.0 to work for the U Chicago managed instances of Gen 3 and kind of try to provide CSOC as part of a SaaS versus a PaaS type of environment?
Yeah, that's essentially the goal for us, at least. It's, I don't know if it's like how to differentiate between PaaS and a SaaS. It's probably gonna do a little bit of both, at least what we're thinking. But there is a lot of well, there's some operational load on the platform engineering team, and sometimes since we're sitting with the keys to the castles. And we want to basically empower all of these different project teams that are working across UChicago, but also for us, whenever we're spinning up new environments, and make that process a lot smoother and easier than it is today. And then also by proxy for everyone else that will be using this application as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
For sure. Yeah. Michael, I don't know if we have time, but I can give like a quick preview of what we're trying to build and how that might look. Yeah.
I mean, as long as if you have like 5 minutes of demo, does that work? And then we'll have a
Yes.
few minutes for questions and feedback. Quick, Peter, I saw your hand up briefly. Did you want
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to ask just a slight clarification from, was it Plumman who asked about whether or not the goal was for this to run first of all in a Chicago? I mean, was that your question? If this was essentially something for use Chicago to serve its own commons?
Well, so like when I say what PaaS would be a platform, right?
Yeah.
Where like then platforms can be ported, a platform as a service, SaaS, right? Software as a service, then it just runs from one environment that can manages multiple environments with multi, RBAC models and instances and so on. So that's why I was trying to figure out the differentiation. I think Jawad answered that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to clarify because it wasn't clear to me from the question and answer. The goal is not for a University of Chicago centralized service to be available to everyone to run their commons, right? The goal is for folks to be able to use the CSOC themselves, set it up themselves, and run it themselves in a multi-commons environment as a central point, but for the commons that they themselves are managing.
Yep. Correct. Okay. That's essentially, so you like the idea is that you should be able to deploy and host this yourselves for your sets of commons, essentially. It won't be something that we are going to host and run for everyone. That's not my goal, at least, but yeah.
It's not that we couldn't set up that service at some point, but it's not the intent at this point. And Jawad, your initial description was probably clear, but I just wanted to make sure, because I wasn't sure of the angle that the question was coming from. So it's absolutely collaboratively with your requirements to set up a capability so that everyone can run their own CSOC.
Yes, that's the general idea, at least. That's what I have gathered as a requirement from speaking internally about this project, at least. Yeah. And yeah, the goal, which I didn't write out here, is still to be cloud agnostic, so that you can still run this anywhere and basically build on cloud agnostic technologies. Yeah. Okay, cool. I can do a quick demo of like what we have so far. So this app is built on top of the front end, at least, the Next.js and Mantine, which is the exact technologies we're using for our front end framework as well. So I just gave a quick demo of the authentication. So I just have a mock provider, and I should have a key cloak, but I don't have it running right now either. But at least you can log in and you get to see your name. Then we have this page, which gives you an overview of all of your different Gen3 or Helm deployments. If you uncheck this, then you get to see all of the Helm deployments. Since this is built on top of the Helm CLI, basically providing an API and stuff over it. If you do Helm list locally, it should give you the same sort of results. This is just filtered for Gen3 stuff. As I mentioned, we are building it to be like agent-centric. Right now, we don't have a way to create new clusters, but if you want to import existing ones, you can, import your production cluster, and it should generate some certificates and a YAML that you can deploy to that cluster. long as that cluster can reach back, you should see it on here. And yeah. Okay, cool. That's one of the things. Housekeeping tasks was another thing. So if you want to kick off like any Gen3 jobs, you should be able to trigger them and view the job, view the logs and etc. There are, yeah, and I mentioned we have basically a Kubernetes dashboard built out, so you can basically, based on whatever cluster you're targeting or whatever context you've set, you should be able to basically go in and you can see like all of these deployments that you've created. Gives you an overview, like, is it healthy? What's wrong? We probably have to do several iterations before these all make sense. But at least this gives you some level of insights into what's going on with your Gen3 without having to mess with all the different CLI tools, essentially. And then the wizard that I was talking about essentially is going to be something like this. And this is where we can all come together and see if this makes sense, if this is even worthwhile. But the idea is basically you select some sort of destination and what modules you want to deploy. This is not a real Gen3. This is just me mocking up and adding stuff. But the idea is that you can then configure like what sort of authentication do you want on this Gen3? Yeah. And then obviously authorization as well. Maybe we can build out a more comprehensive UI for the authorization part. Right now, you just give it a external link if you manage your user YAML externally, or you can input a user YAML directly in here. In the future, we might do maybe something more comprehensive to help people craft these user YAMLs. But yeah. Workspace configuration could be another one where you can basically go in and give people the ability to configure what sort of flavors and stuff. Like if you know Helm today, you probably can do this really easily. And especially if you worked with Gen3 Helm, this is basically just a nice UI wrapper on top of it. And the idea is that once you hit submit, it should deploy Gen3. Yeah. And then the roadmap and the future features that I talked about was basically the cloud stuff, which I haven't done any integrations with yet. I've heard conflicting opinions on whether or not we should be managing infrastructure for others, but that's why we're building this to be agnostic of whatever you're running your infrastructure. But if you don't know how to run your infrastructure, maybe we can tap into the EKS blueprints that you mentioned, Gordon, and build that into here and give people a place to run and host Gen3 in an enterprise manner. And then obviously in the future, also build in Grafana and other monitoring tools into this centralized dashboard. And the most important feature is the light mode and dark mode, of course.
I took a couple of screenshots of that just as is that all right if I put them in the document?
Sure, yeah.
Just
they might, with the disclaimer that this might change. It's a very, very early version of this. Yeah. I mentioned the front end is written in Next.js and using Mantine components. The back end is written in Golang so that we can actually incorporate tools such as Helm and or Terraform or other infrastructure management tool and build them into the application. And potentially in the future, have this all compiled down to a single binary that people can run. Yeah. Anyway, any sort of feedback on what we just presented, and like, is there maybe something that you would like more than other things? Is there something we shouldn't be doing? Yeah, that would be really great to hear.
Yeah, the floor is open, folks. If you have feedback, you can also give feedback offline or in the Slack channel. But this would be a great time to offer that.
two questions on my side in regards to kind of automation. And I know this could take a while too, right? Something related to knowing that there are certain like tasks, right? Back in the day, calling them cron jobs that perhaps don't run all the time, but they're kind of like cleanup work that potentially based on a baseline of something reaching a level that's not clearly defined. If those are some of the considerations of like, okay, right, you need to do some cleanup on your S3 buckets and or deprecate certain resources that are not at idolized at all for like 7 months. Is those things, or is this, are we talking about like, am I going too far into like MVP 2.0?
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of avenues that we can take. And I think this gives us a way to run Gen 3 in an opinionated way for all of the community. Like we still release all of the raw tools such as the Helm and the Terraform templates or the CDK templates that Uwe and Gordon are working on. But this would be the opinionated way of how to run Gen 3 essentially. And that comes along with all these cleanup tasks and anything that we deem like good practices to do, we can sort of build that into this application and sort of educate it in an automated manner. Yeah.
Again, I don't want to think too far ahead. This is exciting though, and I appreciate everything you've done. My second question, I said it sounds like you guys, have zeroed down on Grafana as the logging capability, which is aggregating all the logs from like the AWS resources, which are coming to the CSOC and then obviously loaded to the Grafana engine. Any thoughts? And maybe this is a question to Clint and Jawad, right? That what's on top of that, all the millions of logs that would provide some intuitive information, right, for further analysis. And this is purely on the security side of the house. My question is, I know that this can go in operational and every other aspect as well.
Sorry, what was the question?
So once you're getting all these logs into a centralized environment, Grafana is going to be the kind of the platform used to collect all the data. But then in those millions of logs that come in to Grafana, then what is there a thought on an analytical tool on top of it? Then they can use those logs to provide at least initial kind of analysis of, okay, you're getting 2.5 million records a day, right? Nobody's going to say it's either one or two options. One is you're technical capable enough to create, your own scripts to kind of come up with that. Or number two is I have these logs. How do I go through those logs to identify, the needle in a haystack, even on the most fundamental level?
So for that, at least internally so far, we are leveraging Grafana's dashboarding functionalities. So we're building out different dashboards that can collect out certain metrics from either the logs or from the metrics, the Prometheus level metrics themselves, and being able to present them in a sensible manner to people that are non-technical, essentially, so that you can track number of logins or number of users or all of that. There might and there will be more insights as we learn how to harness that kind of information and present that in an easy to digest manner, and also requirements of what we need to be looking out for, essentially. And then we will keep building out these dashboards. I believe we did release. Yeah, go ahead, Clint.
I guess, sorry to jump in there, but on the security side, we have, enterprise tools because that's what we use. We're looking at, some more open source ones, but I guess maybe that's more of a question to this community, right? Or to this forum, is that helpful, right? Building some of those anomaly detections or things, right? Is that useful to this group, or are each of your independent security organizations really responsible and they're going to make you deploy whatever SIM SOAR tool they have, right? we have an opinion on that, but I'd be interested to know if that's a useful function for us to explore here, or maybe a waste of time if your own security departments force you to do things independently.
That sounds like a great conversation for this group to have.
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
We don't want to take all of this on security. We clearly summarized what I was trying to convey very well. Thank you so much.
Okay. We are about at the hour, so I think this was sort of a tip of an iceberg of an interesting conversation that we'd love to have at one of these meetings. I think so. What are the next steps to wrap this up? We got 2 minutes left. I know you have lots of things to say, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. But I'll send out a invite or like a poll to decide on what kind of the long-term time for this meeting is. I did chat with Uwe during this meeting, who has graciously agreed to present on their solution, the EKS and blueprints, so we can hear more about that in the next meeting, and maybe talk about how that can be kind of included in Gen 3 at some point. If any of you on this list though have other agenda topics or want to sort of present on a little bit more detail on what you have that might be of use, yeah, definitely let me know for this or for future events. Does anybody have any kind of brief last words they want to share?
I just want to remind about the Slack channel. We can continue discussion there as well in between these calls if there are any topics that you would like to know more about or have any questions as well.
That would be great. Should we have maybe a separate channel or something?
There is a separate channel. Yes, you should be invited, Uwe, to a new dedicated Slack channel in a separate. It's called Gen3 Friends workspace. So if you can't find it, let me know and we'll make sure you get an invitation. Okay. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm looking forward to working with you all on this.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
Bye.